A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Scrooge and Marley were business partners for I don't know how many years. When Marley died, Scrooge arranged his funeral, took care of his will, and inherited his share of the company. But Scrooge was not shaken up by the sad event. On the very day of the funeral, he hurried back to his office to work. Making money was more important to Scrooge than the memory of a lost friend. Oh, what a stingy tightwad of a businessman Scrooge was, hard and cold as steel. The cold within him showed on the outside, too. His hair and eyebrows were frosty white, as if his cold heart had frozen them. Nobody ever stopped him in the street. No beggars asked him for a small gift. No children asked him what time it was. No one ever asked directions of him. Did Scrooge care? No. He enjoyed warning all human kindness to stay away from him. Once upon a time, all of the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his office. It was cold, biting, foggy weather. Scrooge kept his office door open so that he could keep an eye on his clerk, Bob Cratchit, who sat in his own small, gloomy office copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was much smaller. "Merry Christmas, Uncle! God bless you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was Scrooge's nephew, Fred, who had come in so quickly that Scrooge had not even noticed him. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug! Nonsense! Christmas means nothing to me. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer. Christmas may not put money in my pocket," answered the nephew, "but it has always been good to me. A loving, forgiving, pleasant time. Well, don't be angry, Uncle. Come, have dinner with us tomorrow." Scrooge said he would not. His nephew left the room without an angry word, in spite of his uncle's meanness. He stepped on his way out to give a Christmas greeting to the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned the greeting cheerfully. As Scrooge's nephew was leaving, two other people came in. They were plump, pleasant-looking older gentlemen who were collecting money for the poor. We ask at Christmas time, a time when those of us who have plenty should share with those who have need. "How much do you wish to give?" "Nothing," shouted Scrooge. "I wish to be left alone. Good afternoon, gentlemen." Scrooge went back to his work until the time came to close the office. As he climbed down from his stool, he saw the clerk put his candle out and put on his hat. "You'll want to be off work all day tomorrow, I suppose," said Scrooge, buttoning his overcoat. "Well, I suppose you must have the whole day, but you better be sure to get back to work bright and early the day after tomorrow." After a lonely dinner by himself in a lonely tavern, Scrooge left for home. The street was dark, and the fog and frost hung thick around the door. As he was putting his key in the door, Scrooge looked at the door knocker and saw, not a knocker, but Marley's face. The face glowed with a dim, greenish light. It was not angry, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead, and though the eyes were wide open, they did not move. As Scrooge stared at this strange thing, it suddenly faded away and became a door knocker again. Scrooge was scared. He walked inside, lit his candle, and locked himself in. Double locked himself in. He put on his nightshirt and sat down before the fire to have his tea. As he sat there, a bell that hung in the room began to mysteriously swing. It swung so softly at first that it hardly made a sound, but soon it rang loudly. Just then, it stopped. Another frightening sound rang out, a strange clanking noise down below, as if some person or some thing were dragging a heavy chain around. The clanking noise became much louder. Something was coming up the stairs, straight toward his door. "It's humbug," said Scrooge. "I won't believe it. I won't." He changed his mind, though, when something passed right through the double-locked door and into the room. As the thing entered, the dying flame in the fireplace leaped up. It was Jacob Marley's ghost. "What's this?" said Scrooge, mean as ever. "What do you want with me?" "Much." It was Marley's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you?" "In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. "I say humbug," Scrooge replied. "I do not believe in such nonsense." At this, the spirit made a frightful cry and shook its chain with an awful noise. Scrooge fell to his knees in shock. "Horrible phantom, why do you haunt me?" "The spirit of every man," the ghost answered, "must walk among his fellow men. It has to wander through the world looking at sad things it can no longer change. I am a prisoner of the chain I made for myself during my life. I chose to put it on, and I chose to wear it. Look at all the things it's made of me. They are things of money and greed. I cannot tell you that I would wish to tell you," said the ghost. "I haven't much time. I cannot rest. I cannot stay long anywhere. When I lived, I did not take the time to be kind to my fellow man. Now I travel the world, paying for my mistakes." "I have sat invisible beside you many, many days," continued the ghost, "but tonight you are allowed to see me so that I may warn you that you still have a chance of avoiding what happened to me. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. The first spirit will visit tomorrow when the bell strikes 1. The second spirit will come the next night at the same time, 1. The third will visit you the night after that at the last stroke of 12. You will see me no more, but for your own sake, remember what I have told you." Then the ghost picked up its chain and walked backwards toward the window, which was raising itself. Scrooge could hear strange, sad sounds outside. The ghost listened, and then it joined the sad sounds, floated into the night, and disappeared. Scrooge went to the window, closed it, and went straight to bed and fell asleep. When he awoke, it was dark. He must have slept through an entire day and far into the next night. He remembered that Marley said the first spirit would visit when the bell struck 1. When the bell rang, light flashed, and the curtains of his bed were suddenly pulled back. Scrooge found himself face to face with a strange figure with long white hair, a white robe, and bright rays of light that seemed to burst from the top of his head. "Are you the first spirit, sir, that Marley said would visit me?" asked Scrooge. "I am." The voice was soft and gentle, unusually low. "I am the ghost of Christmas past. Rise and walk with me." They moved toward the window, passed right through the wall, and stood on an open country road. "Good heavens," said Scrooge. "I remember this place. I grew up here." Boyhood memories filled Scrooge's mind. They walked along the road, Scrooge remembering every gate and post and tree until they arrived at the school. The children had gone home to be with their families at Christmas. Just one lonely child was left there. Scrooge sat down and cried, for he saw that the boy was his own poor, forgotten self. The ghost waved its hand, and Scrooge saw himself again, a little older now. A girl came running in, and she put her arms around the boy and called him her dear, dear brother. She had come to bring him home for Christmas. "Your little sister was a small girl, but she had a big heart," said the ghost. "She died a young woman, but, as I remember, she had a child, your nephew." Just a few seconds later, they were outside a building where Scrooge had been an assistant while training for his future work. Scrooge saw his past self, now a grown-up young man, along with Mr. Fezziwig and another assistant. "No more work tonight," said Mr. Fezziwig. "Christmas Eve! Put everything away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here." In came a fiddler. In came Mrs. Fezziwig with the 3 Miss Fezziwigs. In came the housemaid, the baker, the cook, and the milkman. Kind old Fezziwig invited them all. Soon everyone was dancing. There were games, and there was cake, and Christmas punch, and mince pies. Scrooge watched with excitement. Fezziwig's kindness had cost him nothing, but it was a greater gift than all the money in the world. Suddenly, they were in a different place, and Scrooge saw himself sitting with a pretty young girl named Belle, whom he had once loved. "You have given up all of your hopes and dreams," she was saying tearfully. "Money and profit have become the only things you care about. I have thought a lot about this, and I can't let you go." He seemed to feel she was probably right. She left him. They parted ways, and he had not seen her since. Now they were in another room, not very large or fancy, but full of comfort. Scrooge saw Belle sitting by the fire with her family. "Belle," said the man, "I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon, Mr. Scrooge. I passed his office window, and there he sat alone, all alone in the world." "Spirit, take me away from here. I cannot stand to watch it." Scrooge cried. As he looked away, he saw that he was back in his own bedroom. He stumbled to his bed and fell into a deep sleep. Scrooge awoke. Sure, it must be almost 1, the time Marley had told him that the second ghost would visit him. He kept a sharp lookout so this second spirit would not surprise him, but no ghost appeared. The only thing he noticed was a bright light that seemed to be coming from the next room. He walked into his living room, but it was changed. It seemed to be full of Christmas cheer. Holly, red berries, mistletoe, and ivy were hanging from the walls and ceiling. There was a roaring fire and a wonderful food piled up on the floor in the shape of a throne. Relaxed upon his throne was a jolly giant with a friendly face who held a glowing torch up high to shine its light on Scrooge. "Come in and get to know me better, man," said the ghost in a cheery voice. "I am the ghost of Christmas Present." "Spirit," said Scrooge humbly, "lead me where you wish. Last night I learned a lesson which I have not forgotten. Tonight, if you have anything at all to teach me, let me gain something from it." "Touch my robe," said the spirit. In a flash, they stood in the city streets on a snowy Christmas morning. The sky was gloomy, yet there was a feeling of cheerfulness in all the people they passed. The spirit stopped on the doorstep of a small 4-roomed house. Inside, Bob Cratchit's wife was setting the table with her daughter, while her oldest son was minding a saucepan of potatoes. 2 smaller Cratchits came tearing in, followed by their older sister Martha. Finally, in came Bob Cratchit, with Tiny Tim on his shoulders. Sadly for Tiny Tim, he carried a little crutch, and on his legs he wore an iron brace. The Cratchits gathered round the table, grace was said, and they had a wonderful Christmas dinner. When the dinner was done, the whole family gathered around the fireplace. Bob sat very close to Tiny Tim, holding his hand tenderly. Then he served hot punch, lifted his cup, and gave a toast. "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us," said Bob. "God bless us, every one," said little Tiny Tim. "Spirit," said Scrooge, with a heartfelt interest and worry he had never felt before, "tell me if Tiny Tim will live." "I see an empty little chair in the corner by the fireplace," replied the ghost. "If these shadows remain unchanged, this is the last Christmas we will find him here." Chestnuts and punch were passed around while Tiny Tim sang a song. There was nothing so special about all this. They were not a rich, fancy family. There were holes in their shoes, their clothes were old and worn, but they were happy and thankful for the good time they shared. The ghost and Scrooge traveled far and visited many homes. In each place, Scrooge saw happy people being kind to one another, full of love and blessed by the spirit with whom he traveled. In each place, Scrooge learned more about the true meaning of Christmas. When the clock struck 12, Scrooge looked around for the ghost of Christmas Present, but it was gone. As the last stroke of the bell faded away, Scrooge remembered that Marley had said the third ghost would come exactly that time. Lifting up his eyes, he saw a dark phantom, shrouded and hooded. The phantom slowly, silently came nearer and nearer to Scrooge. It seemed to fill the air with gloom and mystery. It held one hand outstretched. The spirit did not speak or move. "You must be the ghost of Christmas yet to come," asked Scrooge. "You are going to show me the shadows of the things that have not yet happened, but will in the future?" Although Scrooge was quite used to ghosts by this time, he feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled as he followed in its shadow. Suddenly, they were in the middle of the city's business district. The spirit stopped beside one little group of businessmen and pointed his still outstretched hand toward them. "No," said one man, "I don't know much about it, either way. I only know he's dead. It will probably be a cheap funeral, for I swear I don't know for anybody who's going to go to it." Scrooge did not understand what he had heard and looked to the spirit for an answer. But it said nothing. Quiet and dark, the ghost stood beside him with an outstretched hand as the scene changed. Scrooge was right next to a bed on which there lay something covered up. It was the body of a man with no one to watch over it, no one to weep for it. The phantom's hand pointed to the head of the body. A sheet was loosely thrown over it, and Scrooge could have easily uncovered the face, yet he could not make himself do it. He just stood, looking at it. Now, The ghost took Scrooge through several streets familiar to him. Before long they came to poor Bob Cratchit's house and went in. Mrs. Cratchit and the children were again seated around the fire. This time the room was very quiet. The once noisy little Cratchits sat still as statues, looking up at their brother, who was reading to them from the Bible. When Bob came in, his wife hurried to meet him, and the two young Cratchits scrambled up onto his lap. Bob was cheerful and pleasant as they gathered around the fire to talk. He had gone to the cemetery that day to make arrangements for Tiny Tim. "It's a green and peaceful place, and you'll see it often. I promised Tiny Tim that we would walk there on Sundays," he said. The ghost of Christmas yet to come now led Scrooge in another direction until they reached an iron gate. It was a graveyard. "That man that died must be buried here," thought Scrooge. "Now I will learn his name." The spirit stood among the graves, pointing directly at one of them. "Before I go nearer to that gravestone," said Scrooge, "answer me one question. Are these shadows of things that must be, or are they shadows of things that might be?" The spirit said nothing. Scrooge crept toward the dark, lonely grave, trembling as he went. He saw on the stone a name, his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. "No, spirit!" Scrooge cried. "Hear me! I am not the man I was. Because of the lessons I have learned, I have changed. I will be a better person. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. Oh, tell me, I may wash away the writing on this stone," he finished as he saw the phantom shrink and disappear. In its place, he saw only a bedpost. It was his own bedpost, his own bed, his own room. His future was still ahead of him. There was still time left for him to become a better person. He scrambled out of bed, looked out the window, and laughed. It was Christmas Day. He hadn't missed it. The spirits had done it all in one night. Scrooge dressed in his best and wore a happy smile as he walked the streets. When he got to his nephew's house, he passed the door 12 times before, but he had the courage to knock. Scrooge felt completely at home within 5 minutes. There was a wonderful party, wonderful togetherness, and wonderful happiness. The next morning, Scrooge greeted Bob at the office. "Merry Christmas, Bob," said Scrooge to his clerk. "A merrier Christmas than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your pay and try to help your poor family. Make up the fires good and warm, Bob Cratchit." Scrooge kept all his promises and did much, much more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was like a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good as a man as the good old city he knew, or any other good old city, town, or district in the good old world. And it was always said of Scrooge that he knew how to celebrate Christmas well as any man alive. And so, as Tiny Tim once said, God bless us, everyone.